thunderbird is commonly seen in indigenous artwork in Canada's west coast. All the way from the north of Haida Gwaii, all the way south of the Fraser Delta. The images of great eagle with curved horns serves a testament to ancient legend shared by the first peoples of the Pacific Northwest. For centuries, First Nations have shared stories and tales of winged monstrosities which once dominated the western skies. Lightning shot from its eyes when it blinked, and thunder boomed when it flapped its wings. These mythical creatures made their homes among the rocky crags of the coastal mountains. Their nests were enormous structures, composite of tree branches, supplemented by the occasional human bone. The coast sailor said that in ancient times a thunderbird lived atop Black Tusk Peak in the Garibaldi Range north of Squamish, British Columbia. Every once in a while it left its perch to hunt killer whales, which it snatched from the ocean like a bald eagle snatches salmon from a river. Whoa, 1 second there. What did I just say? Black Tusk Peak in Garibaldi Range?
That is at Black Tusk Mountain. You guys have seen this one before.
The coastal tribes had many names for these giant birds. It might surprise some Canadians to learn that the legend of the Thunderbird is by no means a phenomenon unique to the Pacific Northwest First Nations or all over the Great White North. Thunderbirds have been spotted all over the Great Lakes. There's been thunderbirds in the Maritimes, a place that I call home. The Micmac people of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick called this creature Kualna. Thunderbirds of the Arctic. The Inuit of northern Canada have their own version of the Thunderbird legend. In his 1875 book, Tales of the Tradition of the Eskimo, Danish geologist Dr. Hinrik Rink wrote that the Inuit spoke of a fabulous bird called Surdlernax. These birds hunted seals and were perfectly capable of killing full-grown men if they so desired. Popular zoologist and polar explorer Edward W. Nelson recorded an Inuit story describing the last of the Thunderbirds. This avian abomination supposedly lived along the lower Yukon River, where it preyed upon caribou and even snatching up the occasional Inuit hunter. Thunderbirds of the Rocky Mountains. The Kootenai Indians of the Canadian Rockies, who traditionally made annual hunting trips east into the prairies to hunt for buffalo, had their own Thunderbird legends. German-American anthropologist Franz Boas included some of these stories in his collection entitled Kintua Tales. The Blackfoot were another people of Canadian prairies with Thunderbird stories. According to French archaeologists, a bold Blackfoot named Harry Undermose, who told him an incredible story involving his own grandfather's alleged abduction by a Thunderbird. Harry's grandfather was a Cree medicine man named White Bear. Despite the animosity which existed at that time between the Blackfoot and Crees, White Bear married a blood Blackfoot woman and joined her band. In those days, White Bear was a skilled eagle trapper. In order to catch an eagle, whose tail feathers played an important role in Blackfoot ceremonies, he first found himself in a shallow pit. Next, he baited the pit with a stuffed animal. Then he camouflaged it with grass and vegetation. Finally, he concealed himself within the pit and waited for the eagle to arrive. When the eagle sank its talons into the bait, White Bear grabbed it by the legs and thereby trapped it. In the winter of 1850, 28-year-old White Bear and his band camped out south of Fort Edmonton, Alberta. Their food supplies were low as hunting was poor in that fall. To make matters worse, there were few buffalo in that part of the prairies in the winter. Inevitably, the band went hungry. Eventually, White Bear and a handful of Blackfoot hunters wandered west into the Rocky Mountains in search of game. Mysteriously, hunters disappeared from the party one by one. In spite of this, the hunters decided to split up as they would have a better chance on finding food. One day, while camped east of present-day Banff, Alberta, White Bear found a deer. He brought the animal down and set to start butchering it. When he finished dressing the carcass, he packed the meat onto his back and headed west. Suddenly, he was surrounded by a shadow of an enormous bird. Before he knew what was happening, White Bear found himself raising into the air. With a thrill of horror, he realized the Thunderbird had grabbed a hold of the meat in the pack and was carrying him and the meat off to its lair. After a terrifying journey over the mountains, White Bear landed on an enormous nest built atop a high cliff. Bones of various animals laid around him. Some of these were unmistakably human-like, the last remains of missing hunters. Also in the nest were 2 baby Thunderbirds. Using his skills as an eagle hunter, White Bear seized the birds' legs and jumped out of the nest with them. The baby birds flapped their wings furiously, slowing their descent, and White Bear landed on the ground unharmed. He plucked 2 feathers from the baby birds' tails as souvenirs of his adventure and stuck out east for the prairies. Other members of Blackfoot Nation, in addition to White Bear, claim they have seen Thunderbirds around the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. A Blackfoot named Dog Takes a Gun claimed that his parents saw a Thunderbird near what is now Calgary, Alberta in 1860. On July 1920, hikers reported seeing a massive bird. Cryptozoologist Mark A. Hall described hundreds of alleged Thunderbird sightings reports throughout the 20th century, most of them in the United States. In his 2004 book, Thunderbirds, America's Living Legend of Giant Birds, many of these sightings are eerily similar. Hall contended that when considered as a whole, these sightings seem to indicate that a rare, large bird, yet unknown to science, once lived and perhaps still lives in the wilderness of North America. Drawings from witness descriptions suggest that the bird exhibits the following characteristics. Its wingspan measures 15 to 25 feet. Its height, 4 to 8 feet tall. The bird is normally dark, usually being brown, gray, or black. Its head and neck are bare, almost like a turkey vulture. It kills and eats large game such as sheep, deer, caribou, moose, colts, dogs, and occasionally human beings. It has an outward appearance of a California condor, but displays predatory traits, more consistent of those of a hawk. Its bill is curved, and its feet are capable of carrying heavy loads. It breeds on crags and simple nests with sticks and leaves. It is long-living and slow breeding, typically laying 1 to 2 eggs at a time. It's nocturnal. It is migratory. It travels south over the mountains during the fall and north over the same route during the spring. Many supposed witnesses of Thunderbirds claim that it makes a loud noise when it flaps its wings. Hall suggests that this characteristic, coupled with the Thunderbird's occasional appearance during the spring thunderstorms, helped to spawn the legend of the Thunderbird was capable of conjuring storms. That's just a few stories of the Thunderbirds in Canada, folks. These things go way back, and there are hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of stories of these Thunderbirds in our First Nations cultures, not just here in BC, all over Canada. Every First Nations culture has stories about the Thunderbird, just like Sasquatch. Only with the Thunderbird, we probably have way more evidence of their existence than even Sasquatch. They have bones, they have nests, they have visual sightings all over North America. The list just goes on and on and on. So there's definitely something with the Thunderbird. Are they still on the planet today? I would say more than likely. There was actually one time I was camped out on Harrison Lake, the same place we had Sasquatch tracks outside our tent. We witnessed the alien in the water. We had UFOs flying over our heads. That exact same place where all that stuff happened. It was me, Monique, my mother was there, Thelma, and my grandmother. And we all were in our tents. And we heard this massive bird fly over top of us. And this was at night too. Remember the stories there, they just said that they're nocturnal. I don't know many birds that go flying around at night. You just don't see birds flying around at night. It's pretty rare. You might get the odd like Canada goose or something flying around by itself at night. But it's pretty rare to see birds out at night. And anyway, this was late in the night, and all we heard was this massive wing flapping in the air. And it kind of freaked us all out, and we just kind of heard it and listened for more, and it was just gone. But Steve Isdahl, he may be a lucky man, because that thing, whatever was in that Steve video, it could be a giant eagle, a bald eagle, but by the looks of that shadow, this thing is massive, and Steve should be grateful that he's still here today, because if that is what it could possibly be, a Thunderbird, that thing was circling him. And when a bird like that, a bird of prey, is circling you, that means it wants you. So we still have Steve here. He's a lucky man, and hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is another episode of Steve Isdahl's
What the fuck
was that? For those of you that's a little unsure of what's happening here, Steve Isdahl posted a video a few weeks ago, and this is his footage here. There's clearly a large bird flying overhead and circling. You can see the shadow on the ground circling around. And when he mentioned Black Tusk Mountain, it's actually the exact same video. So those stories that I just read from some of the history of Thunderbirds in Canada, they stated that Black Tusk Mountain is actually where the Thunderbird had a nest, and it's just, maybe it's coincidence, but Steve was pointing at Black Tusk Mountain, and he had a giant bird flying over his head. There it is.
That is at Black Tusk Mountain.
If you know of a Steve video you would like me to break down, send the link to me. If you've had a Sasquatch encounter or any kind of encounter that's paranormal and you'd like me to share it on the channel, email me at livingwithsasquatch@gmail.com. Get your votes in now for our real Sasquatch caught on video top 10 list. Cheers for now.